if you're not speaking, if you were able to mute while you're not speaking, that would be very helpful. But for the purposes of the recording, I will say good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think I pretty much know all of you, but just in case this is your first call, I'm Alison from Stop Sizewell C. My colleague Paul, who normally joins these meetings, he's on holiday at the moment, but he said he might join briefly, so I'll keep an eye out for him. What we're going to do this evening, because there's quite a lot we could talk about, is I just wanted to give a couple of updates, sort of things of significance that seem to be happening around the world at the moment, but then to focus on the issue-specific hearings which are coming up in early July, and specifically what you could do for deadline 3, which is next Thursday, the 24th of June. And then we can also have a chat about EDF's consultations. And it's a bit telling that they come last on the list, because normally they're the first things we talk about, but times have changed, have they not? So I'll just start by just giving you a sort of very brief rundown of you know, a couple of things that you've probably noticed in the news. The main one being Taishan. The 2 nuclear reactors in Taishan are significant because they are of the EPR design, the same design that's being built at Hinkley Point and is proposed for Sizewell C, and they're a joint venture between China General Nuclear and EDF. And EDF has claimed the EPR as a proven reactor because it is operating in China, whereas, as you know, it's not operating in France or Finland, the other places where it's being built. So the latest information that we've got, and this includes some kind of EDF insider information, is that it relates to number 1 EPR reactor, which was shut down in 2020 for a regular refueling outage. And during this, abnormally high concentrations of certain rare gases, mainly xenon and krypton, were detected in the water of the primary circuit, which circulates in the reactor and is therefore in direct contact with the fuel. And directly, this doesn't necessarily represent an immediate danger because that primary circuit is a closed operation. And EDF's internal sources say there's always been radioactivity in the primary circuit, but beyond a measurement of 100 becquerels per ton of water, they automatically shut down reactors. Now in China, that level was set at 150 becquerels, so a bit higher. But according to the information received, the new measurements indicated quantities of between 250 and 300. And in order not to interrupt the operation of the reactor, the Chinese authorities decided to increase the threshold to 324. In other words, 3 times the French standard. So you can immediately see why EDF were anxious and were calling urgent board meetings, you know, because they're thinking about their reputation, they're thinking about, you know, that something's happened for which they may have some liability for, and that goes completely against sort of French safety standards. But apparently they have known about this problem for some time, and it was finally revealed by CNN on Monday. EDF tends to sort of shift questions onto its subsidiary Framatome. But I think, you know, it was interesting, the New Scientist kind of put all of it down to, you know, the fuel rods, and saying that there had been some kind of degradation of the coating of the fuel rods. But I think the key question which needs answering, and which I don't have the answer to, obviously, but, you know, the Office of Nuclear Regulation and others need to determine as soon as possible, is have those fuel casings been compromised during the operation of the Taishan reactor, perhaps by excessively high power, high temperatures or pressures. Now, we know that the fuel that is burnt in EPRs is called high burn up. It burns at a much higher temperature and it takes a lot longer to cool down. So, you know, is there a connection there between this high burn up fuel and what's happened in Taishan? Is it even the case that Taishan is definitely using that type of fuel? So if any of those questions are answered in the affirmative, then that would call the whole design of the EPR into question. So, you know, we have a long way to go to sort of get answers to those questions, but obviously it is incredibly significant. And we need to try and make sure that the British media doesn't play down the situation. But of course, I think primarily there's a feeling of relief that local people are not necessarily in imminent danger. So it's much more about trying to ascertain whether the design is at fault. Just other very brief news. Since we last had our Zoom call, problems at Sizewell B have been revealed. And in this case, there seems to be corrosion in the thermal sleeves, which surround the fuel rods and which need to be repaired. So the outage, which started in April, I think was due to be over in May, was it? No, it started earlier than that, it was due to be over, and somebody will correct me, is now definitely extended till August. And there's a lot of sort of teeth sucking when you talk to Sizewell staff and suggestions that it might take longer than that. Certainly by the last time there was a meeting between NGOs and the Office of Nuclear Regulation, there was no approved plan to carry out the repairs. So EDF need to come up with a plan. The ONI needs to say, yes, that's a good plan. The work needs to be carried out. And then the ONI needs to say, yes, the reactors can be restarted safely. So we don't know how long Sizewell B will be out. And you may also have seen if on our Facebook page, although it didn't make national media, that there was a fire at Hinkley Point yesterday, which I think started in the galleries, one of the galleries that's used to run pipes and cables around the power station. So it was put out, and EDF said they would be learning lessons from that. So plenty happening. I think it would be interesting, perhaps we can do this at the end, unless people would prefer to talk about it now, just to have a little bit of feedback about the site inspections, which took place last week. People want to hear about that now or later on? Marianne. Well, last week the examining authority were in Suffolk all week, and they had a detailed programme of site inspections, which were arranged by EDF. It did involve meeting at least a couple of people on this call. I can see that Stephen Beaumont and Graham Lacey are both on this call. So they were able to talk to the examining authority at their properties and, show the proximity of EDF's proposals, in both cases, the Sizewell Link Road to their properties. I spent the first day, along with Bill Parker, on the main site tour. And it was frustrating that we seemed to spend longer looking at a pond which may or may not have natterjack toads in it at some point than we did looking at the coastal frontage, which we did right at the end of the day. And that was the real eye-opener for me. I mean, I think people like Bill and Paul, have been able to much better visualise the impact on the coast of building Sizewell C. And it was when I saw markers laid out, on the dune, showing where the toe of the sea defence would go and where the sea defences would start to rise, that I think it really hit home just how much of the beach we're going to lose. And for those of you that are coming on the guided walk next Monday, I will be a much better guide now than I would have been a couple of weeks ago, having had that day with EDF and the examining authorities on the main site. I certainly learned a lot. And the examining authority were pretty strict about shutting down discussion about the merits of the application. They also shut EDF down when they tried to justify things like, the process that was undergone before Coronation Wood was felled. But, it's difficult to know what their reactions are. They're very professional. They're very good at sort of maintaining quite poker faces throughout. So, we've also seen that in their evenings, they went to places like Thorpe Nest to look at the sea defences there. They went back to Sizewell Marshes. They went to places near the railway line in Woodbridge, and a number of other places without EDF escorting them. So yeah, I guess we won't know for many months exactly what impact that had on that. But if there's anybody on the call who was on those site inspections wanted to add anything, or anybody had any questions about them, we could just take a couple of minutes. Klaus?
Yeah, I attended the Two Village bypass, so basically the last day here in Suffolk for them. They were a bit more relaxed. Mollet Farm managed to get a lot of chunk of time with them to show impacts on is it Foxborough Wood, etc. So it was very, very interesting. Unfortunately, in a way, we being the more southern end of the whole problem, we sort of were dealt a very short hand with regards to traffic issues hitting a little Glenham and Marlsford on the A12. Also, Wickham Market got sadly a rather short shrift bus journey through. And unfortunately, the way people were seated in the bus, we basically stayed in the bus once we've done the 6-kilometer walk from Friday Street to the northern end of Glenham Hall, where the Two Village bypass starts or ends, however your perspective is. So we stayed on the bus apart from the southern park and ride. And so that created sort of missed opportunities, especially with Wickham Market, because there's a lot of fear for rat running, etc., of traffic trying to either cut Ipswich away when they come from Cambridge, etc., as well as, you know, people, contractors trying to reach the southern park and ride there. The park and ride issue, again, we did about an hour and a half walkabout. But by that time, the inspectors had become quite firm again. They had relaxed during the day, I thought. So we did manage to point a few things out. And hopefully, you know, I can only repeat, I mean, very professional, very good in way. Yeah, we sent letters afterwards sort of pointing out, you know, that actually we should have spent a little bit more time here and there and pointing out the issues. Thanks.
Thanks, Klaus. I think we might move on actually, just because, you know, there's probably quite a lot we need to talk about, but you know, we can come back to this at the end if people have got more comments or questions on it. So I think the main business is to talk about the issue-specific hearings. I hope you've all seen the dates. On the 6th of July, it's the draft DCO, the 7th and 8th of July is traffic and transport, the 9th of July, socio-economic and community impacts, the 13th of July, landscape and visual impact, the 14th of July, coastal geomorphology, and the 15th and 16th of July, biodiversity and ecology, including marine issues. Issue-specific hearings on compulsory acquisition, which take place the 17th and the 20th of August, is where we get the opportunity to talk about funding, whether there's going to be enough money for all those compulsory acquisitions. So I'm going to pass you to Marianne in a moment to talk about sort of what happens in issue-specific hearings. But just to quickly say that I was told by Michelle Gregory of PINS that there's no guarantee that they will organise more issue-specific hearings on different issues, because the examining authority have basically prioritised ones where they think they've got questions that need answering. But, you know, I think we can all play a part in trying to make it more likely that more issue-specific hearings will take place, and we can come back to that. And then we'll also talk a little bit just about how you request to speak. But Marianne, let's go to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Alison, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Marianne Fellows, representative for Albury Town Council, but I've been on these meetings only because I did a bit of work for the Scottish Power Renewables Development Consent Orders, another energy project, so got a bit of experience of how the hearings run. So thank you for the opportunity, and I found them useful myself, hugely useful. A big thank you to Alison and Paul for their continuous hard work. So issue-specific hearings, the clue's in the title. It's normally about a specific matter. It's very different to the open floor hearings that you may have taken part in that you don't get a time slot and you're not just speaking to the team yourself. It's more of a round table discussion, but it is one that is organised and managed. So PINs have said that they may actually invite who they want to attend. But I do think that we should, before next Thursday, which is deadline 3, send an email to confirm if you want to speak at a particular hearing and that you have evidence on that hearing on that topic. So don't be afraid to keep saying, no, I do have something relevant, or my parish and town council really does want to be involved. That's a key issue for us. So how they run the issue specific hearings, Alison's gone through the title for each one. They normally start at 10 in the morning, but have an arrangements conference about 9:20. And you do need to be prepared to be there for at least half the day or the whole day. You can still watch live and you still can send in comments afterwards, but it's very important if you want to have the opportunity to speak that you're there for the session. Once the session starts, the planning inspectorate will introduce what they think the topic is about. So they'll, for example, when they talk about traffic and transport, they'll spend the first half an hour saying what they think their key issues are or what they want to find out, what questions they have. They will probably ask the applicant to then outline their plans and their answers. Then they will go to the statutory consultees, so East Suffolk Council, Suffolk County Council, who will probably have barristers or counsel speaking for them. It won't be elected members. There'll be somebody who's been instructed to speak. They'll then go to any statutory consultees who are specific to that topic. And that will depend. For example, it might be the Environment Agency, might be RSP Minsmere. Then they will come to parish and town councils and other groups such as Stop Sizewell C. The key to it is to have some idea about what you want to say if you're the representative, or to feed information to whoever's going to be your representative, but to keep an ear out for what's being said. And it may be that something is being misrepresented, or you feel you can add something, and you can say that. You can raise your hand on the on the system, the yellow hand, or failing that, if you're very, very polite and do it just very rarely, I switch on my camera and go, I'm terribly sorry, but I really must, but the planning inspector, I feel, will come to people, but they will do it in sequence. Okay. We found it was helpful, a few of us, to actually have either a mobile phone link, a text message, or an email exchange. And if you completely forgot something, or if you feel there's something relevant that needs to be said and you've had your slot, let someone else know perhaps. And I know Alison is hoping to be on most of the calls. I'm hoping to be on most of the calls. And I think we do need to build a level of trust between us that we can work together. On that, I would encourage you to get together with neighbouring parish and town councils, especially on the Wednesday the 7th and Thursday the 8th, where they do traffic and transport. I think they're going to be 2 very big days, 2 very full days, with lots of information that needs to be had. But again, please don't worry. If you don't get called to speak, there is still the opportunity to put your information in writing and to ask for further time for further issue-specific hearings and why you think you need those. If your particular topic has not been listed, and there's a few obvious exceptions in my opinion, those are noise and light pollution, cumulative impact, for example, and flooding, then I think we should still ask for specific issue hearings for those matters. It's obvious that the inspectorate, are limited in time, and they may, as Alison said, decide that they will do everything via writing on those topics. But we'll just have to see if we can ask for a few more, if we can. remember that by each deadline, you need to send in more information. So even if you're not taking part in the issue-specific hearings yourself, please either try to listen in live or watch them back afterwards, and then send in written information in response to those. So it's about keeping the conversation going. And actually, sometimes little nuggets of new information will emerge via that. And I can't underestimate or tell you how valuable your contribution is. It really is, both in demonstrating the weight of feeling and the importance that we all feel about these issues, but also the level of knowledge and detail you have. It is crucial that the Planning Inspectorate get to hear from everybody. So the issue-specific hearings are going to happen over those 2 weeks. The programme's been posted, but by next Thursday, so by Wednesday at the latest if you can, please email PINS and let them know which issue-specific hearings you want to speak at, or say you reserve the right to speak at all of them, and please can you have an invitation, and let them know if you're combining with someone else, because they seem to like it. Lastly, don't be offended if you say something and it doesn't get a reaction. As you've been told, they have to be very professional. But also, my experience was that counsel, you know, the instructed barristers, have a way of phrasing things that the inspector actually do respond to and like. So it could be you're saying something and then somebody else says it and they go, oh yes, you know. So they will defer to the barristers. They will defer to the paid representatives of East Suffolk and Suffolk County Council, and to the experts within the topics, but they are willing to listen to parish and town councils, and I do think we have a role to play in the issue-specific hearings. So keep up the good work. Try to spread the reading amongst yourselves. If you've got 2 or 3 people that can work on the topics, perhaps share those out, and then decide who's going to speak. Doesn't have to be the same person. If you ask for a place for your parish and town council, then just make sure that the link is passed to the person who's speaking that day. And during the arrangements conference, just let the case team know who it is who's speaking that day. Doesn't have to be the same person. Okay, happy to take any questions.
Before we do have questions, I think we can sort of deal with the next topic, which is deadline 3, kind of, pretty neatly now, really, because that deadline, which is the end of Thursday next week, the 24th of June, is the same deadline for asking to speak, and also sending in further written information if you can do so. And as Marianne's pointed out, new information will emerge, and one of the best places to look is in the answers that EDF has given to the examining authority's written questions. Now, I know it was a really big deal that they posed so many questions, and it is a gargantuan document because I think they've all been kind of stitched together. But we have parcelled that out to members of Stop Sizewell C and to some of the experts that are working with us. And, we found some quite interesting information, including, for example, that EDF has got a new life cycle assessment of its the carbon emissions associated with the plant, which goes all the way through to decommissioning. So we've got an academic looking at that, for example. So that's a really good place to look. If you just type into the search bar of the Planning Inspectorate website, written answers or written questions, then, it's probably the first document that will come up. Stop Sizewell C submitted 11 written representations, and until today, they all appeared on the Planning Inspectorate website as a single document, which was completely bizarre because they covered very diverse topics such as funding, carbon footprint, a critique of the economic statement, traffic and transport, and they were written by different authors. They didn't even look the same, and we had to have a bit of a fight with PINS, but we have persuaded them to separate them out now, so they're all on the PINS website separately. But the focus that we're going to have in these issue-specific hearings is we're going to work with the parish council in terms of taking part in the one about the draft DCO, because that is about all the conditions that are attached to any consent order that's given. And so, you know, there'll be things in there that are kind of provisions that protect local communities. Now, you know, obviously we work very closely with our local community, but that's not the top priority for Stop Sizewell C. The top priority for Stop Sizewell C is stopping Sizewell C. But on traffic and transport, we have an expert who is looking through all the new material that's been put in, just to sort of check whether there's anything new there. On socioeconomic, the author of our critique of EDF's economic statement is looking at EDF's latest information, and again sort of pulling out questions and inadequacies in the way they've gone about working out what impact the project's going to have. Community impacts, we're just doing that between ourselves. We know that other groups are looking at the landscape and visual impact issue, and that the AONB partnership will have someone speaking there. Coastal geomorphology, we have some academics from Ulster University who did a critique of EDF's work on you know, coastal processes, and they are also looking for new information. And with biodiversity and ecology, you know, obviously there's organisations like the RSPB, Suffolk Wildlife Trust, Friends of the Earth, Mincemead Level Stakeholder Group, and others that are working very much on those issues. So I think we would see ourselves as having a supporting role there. But I wanted to ask Chris from Task, who I think is on this call, if you could just give us some input about what you're working on, please.
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble unmuting there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, thanks.
Okay, yeah, no, we haven't quite finalised our plans. As you alluded to earlier, we're all sort of learning as we go along. And indeed, I've been trying to speak to PINS for the last few days and haven't had any joy there, just to sort out a few sort of queries. But we're basically, our intention is to have representatives there, a bit like Marianne said, so at each hearing. Even if someone isn't sort of aiming to specifically mention something, a particular issue, it's really to be there to sort of pick up on what people are saying and make a point, because there was a few times at the open floor hearings when the applicant made some statements that you sort of think it'd be worth sort of querying at the time, just to put it into PIN's mind. So basically we've got an expert who's confirmed that he'll speak on the rail matters, assuming the transport strategy gets onto that, which I imagine they will. We have a marine expert who we're hoping to hear by tomorrow that he'll be able to represent us at the marine ecology hearing. We're currently talking to our sort of legal team as well, and subject to costs, we're aiming to have legal representation at the landscape hearing, particularly with regard to sort of AONB matters and protection of the designated landscapes. And I think that's sort of basically sort of a quick summary of where we are at the moment, and we may add our voice to certain of the other subjects. It may be something that Marianne will be able to answer, because I know they issue a more detailed agenda about 5 days before the actual hearing. I'm just wondering how informative that is, and then how much they actually stick to that when they actually have the issue-specific hearing, because obviously the more we're forewarned about exactly what they're going to talk about, the better. I just also wanted to reiterate what others have said in terms of looking for information in the answers to PINS's questions, not just EDF's answer, the applicant's answers, but also some of the other statutory bodies. There's some really useful information, say Natural England, Environment Agency, those sort of organisations, and very good things to pick up on, and can give you ideas for more questions later on. So yeah.
Marianne, do you want to answer that? And then we'll go to Rachel, who's got her hand up.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Chris, and thanks for the work that you're doing, the group together. Yes, a more detailed agenda should come out a week before. I think that's quite important, because if you look at traffic and transport over 2 days, it'd be very helpful to know at what point they're going to be talking about rail and about the beach landing facility, for example. Is that the beach landing facility going to be discussed as part of transport because it's part of the transport strategy? Or is it going to come up under the marine issues, under ecology and diversity the following week? So yeah, it's going to be really important to ask for that detailed agenda. And if when the agenda comes out, it's not detailed enough, then I'll certainly be following that up with some specific questions to try to drill down into when things are going to be discussed. One of my other tactics during the Scottish Power Renewables hearings was at the beginning of the session, quite early on, to say, is it my understanding that today we're going to talk about this, this and that, or before lunch we're going to talk about this, this and that, or have I got that wrong? You know, just to kind of make sure that they understand we do want to talk about something. Don't forget, it needs to include this. So I think you need to kind of try and do that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, back to Klaus, when he said he didn't feel there was enough time on particular parts of the visit, I would use the issue-specific hearings as a good opportunity to perhaps send in before that some photographs of the places, and then refer to that in the issue-specific hearings, and you can illustrate or send in afterwards any points you want to make about that. So yeah, do just try to connect up the dots really on that. Was there another question I forgot? Oh, the other thing I wanted to let people know, my apology for missing Suffolk down the walk, but a few of us are going down with the planning inspectorate to Hinkley Point C. And I'm also talking to some of the representatives of local councils there with my colleague Sue Osborne. And we're hoping to get some information that we will then feed into the issue specific hearing as real evidence. And especially on the first day, on the 6th of July, when they talk about the draft development consent order, which is the conditions, and if it's given permission, how it will actually be managed. So definitely hope to get some stuff to feedback from Hinkley. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Rachel, you have the floor.
Thanks, Alison. Just very quickly, me and Alison are going to be speaking at the Norfolk Climate COP meeting tomorrow night, and we're just putting some stuff together. And I wondered, does anybody here have an accurate figure for how many fish get trapped? I had a kilogram figure, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And I also never knew actually whether it was daily or monthly or yearly or what. So has anybody just off the top of their head here happen to know how many fish are squashed and murdered in the cooling intakes? Thanks.
It's very complicated. But we started, you've got to look at two issues. One is, without getting too complicated, is the fish that get impinged, which are those that get trapped on the wire, which is designed to stop the big fish getting sucked into the pipes. And then on top of that, you've got the fish that get entrained because they're small and they get sucked right through the whole 3 kilometre water cooling system and then get churned out, sort of basically dead the other end. We took some figures based on Sizewell B data that was taken over 4 years of fish that were impinged, and basically by sort of multiplying up the volume of water that Sizewell C will use as compared to Sizewell B, Sizewell C would impinge about 20 million fish a year. Now, obviously I can't put that into kilograms, unfortunately, but I can send you the spreadsheet and details of our workings, which basically took EDF's figures and then sort of extrapolated for the greater volumes for Sizewell C. But that is, talking to our marine expert, is just basically a drop in the ocean, because you've got literally millions of other smaller fish like pipefish, which go through the 10 millimetre grills and just go through the whole system and get churned out, sort of basically dead. Any soft-bodied fish like herring and sprat, if they get impinged or taken right through the system, they're just basically dead. It's only a few of the harder skinned fish, like the flatfish and things like that, that might actually survive and get put back out into the sea. Probably injured, but I don't know if that helps. But
thanks. Sorry, thanks, Chris. That was the only big sort of measurement I had, but that's probably even better actually what you've given me.
So I send you our experts fish report?
Yeah, if you could, you've got my email address.
Yeah.
If I could have it by 5 tomorrow, because I'm on stage as it were at 6, so
that's fine.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Okay, was that it for you, Rachel? Yeah. Alison Andrews, please.
Oops. Right, can you hear me? Yep.
We can, yeah.
Good. No, this is just, I've been wondering whether to apply for the ISH because in the written, in relation to coastal geomorphology, in the written thing, the Old North Association has said pretty much all it knows, except perhaps we'll find out a bit more. But it seems to me from what you're saying is apply and just be in there, even if you actually don't think you've got anything new to say, in case something gets given too much of a nuance and you can put your hand up and say, don't forget X. So the thing is, your advice is jolly well be sitting in there.
Absolutely, that's our advice. I mean, we can't guarantee that everybody will be invited, but we think you should really try.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's Paul here. Alison, I think if you apply as Old North Association, you're much more likely to get accepted in anyway. So definitely do it and be there.
Yeah.
And you might want to think about the transport ones, because if they start messing around with things like the BLF and the impact on the coast, that's another piece that you might want to have a say in. So I would say put all of those 3 in at least, if you were the two days for if in the end when you see the agenda for these things you want to drop out of one, you can always tell them I'll drop out of that one. So they'll be quite happy for that to happen.
There are 2 on transport. We don't know.
We don't know exactly what's in what yet. And,
okay.
So you'll have to wait until the main agenda comes out. But for the moment, say you want to be in both, and
Okay.
then you can always drop out later. Okay.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And I should just reiterate that in their letter, they say if you wish to participate, let the planning team know, case team know by emailing the generic email address no later than Thursday the 24th of June, and ensure you include your interested party number. There's nothing in there that says you have to justify your reasons for wanting to take part or to give any indication of what additional evidence you want to share. I'm going to go to Anne-Marie.
Hi, it's actually Dave going to respond to a little bit of information there for Rachel as well, on building on what Chris just said. In the Environment Agency response, they highlight that EDF's data on the European eel is completely inadequate, and that's a critically endangered species. And also the smelt population, which is a type of salmonid based in the Alden Ore estuary, is also going to be impacted. And again, there's no data. So 2 really important species there too that are absolutely threatened by those intakes.
I hate to say it, but the smelt population in the Alden Ore estuary is really rather slight. In 8 surveys over 5 years, they found 250, because the problem is because there's been a sluice at the top since about mid-1950s. The poor little smelt can't get up to the fresh water to breed. So we only have a very slight population there in the Alden Ore estuary. It's more out at sea somewhere.
They were highlighting the fact that each of these smelt populations are really individual, and so they highlighted the Alden Ore population as being particularly vulnerable through this. So lean into your 250.
There's hardly any there.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Sorry about dogs barking.
Sorry, thanks. Sorry, just quickly, thanks to both of you. Rob, how do you spell, you said eel, and what smelt? How do you spell that?
As I used to smell, S-M-E-L-T.
Oh, right. Thanks.
Can I ask if there are any parish council representatives on the call who would like to share with everybody what they're hoping to focus on? We just spend a few more minutes on this, then we can talk about EDF's consultations
I think Paul Ashton went on the visit to the Northern Park and Ride. I haven't had feedback yet from him how that went. I think from the Oxford's point of view, from a parish council point of view, it would be a matter of looking at the transport issues. I think. I mean, that's where we've got a specific interest. But I have to check with Paul whether he's will be planning to do that. I will report back to him about the discussion. One question while I'm on is it the DCO specific hearing that will address the issue of governance? Because as you know, I got involved with, name's gone now, who's produced that excellent paper on governance. Is that where the governance issue is going to be looked at?
I would imagine so. It was Mark Goyder that you were.
Oh, that's right. It was Mark. Absolutely. Yeah. Is Mark on this? I don't think Mark's on this.
No, he's not. He's not on the call today.
Yeah.
Any other parish councils?
Thank you.
Yeah, CAMSIASH, we will take part on traffic and transport, linked to also to the Southern Park and Ride. I imagine Wickham Market and Marlsford will also go on with Southern Park and Ride and transport. So I'm not quite sure with the Southern Park and Ride whether it's a landscaping day or a traffic and transport day, because our main issues in a sense are there about the landscaping as it is on the elevated side.
Oh, I'd go for both.
Yeah.
Is anybody on this call from Darsham? Of course, Darsham, I think, are the ones.
Yes, Michael. Michael, are you there?
Just trying to unmute, sorry.
Will you be going in? Because I know that, were you there for the visit on the Northern Park and Ride?
I wasn't able to make the visit for health reasons. We have a council on Tuesday, and I want to discuss that whole issue with them to see if anybody there is able to support me for going on to this. Obviously, transport and the effect of the MPR is very crucial to Darsham, and with the new news that we've got about the additional planning sites of 110 houses down the road and all those lodges going on at High Lodge, it's going to severely affect the volumes of traffic and the day and the times at which those volumes are going to be quite significant.
Yeah, I mean, that's affecting Oxford as well. And as I think you know, your chairman and vice chairman joined our last parish meeting to discuss that planning development. Yeah. So I think there's a joint interest there. But it's a matter of knowing if you're going to do it, it's going to be a matter of knowing who's going to be on that call and how we liaise with you.
Thank you. And Paul has had to leave us, but he wanted to share that Theberton and Eastbridge Parish Council are aiming to attend, like Elborough Town Council, as many sessions as possible. Does anybody else want to ask questions or share about issue-specific hearings? Regan.
Yeah, just very quickly, we did put in a request under the DCO one to talk about what's called beneficial ownership, a transfer of ownership of the project, because the assumption has been that it's EDF, but they have actually asked in the DCO, and we did do a bit of correspondence with the unfortunately rather right-wing Tory MPs who were concerned about China possibly taking it over. But we looked into the whole issue, and they're actually asking for the right to transfer the ownership without the approval of the Secretary of State, which is normal. And they're quoting Wilfer as the precedent for this, but the distinction is that Wilfer was always a consortium that was going to develop it and then market the project at a later point. So it's just to let people know that that issue is being pursued. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Regan. I might follow up with you about that specifically, if I may, because that's very interesting. Anybody else?
Regan, could I after this, I don't want to bother anybody else. I'd quite like to follow that up with you as well. If we could, can you stay on, but after at the end, I'm particularly interested in the China group.
A couple of minutes. I've got my fitness class after.
Okay. Thank you. Just it'll only take a couple of minutes.
Any more questions? If you can't raise your hand, you can raise your digital hand. You could raise your physical hand. Scanning, can't see anything. Okay. Oh, Christopher Lewis.
Yeah, I just wondered how the finance thing is fitting in. I realized that you've done some work on that, but I looked at all the responses from EDF, and they looked pretty dubious, really. I mean, obviously they've financed the development stage, but then there are sort of vague things about pension funds and so on, but nothing much else. And that seems to me to be a rather, I mean, are they going to ask the government for it all, or what are they going to do?
Well, I think their answers on finance was a classic case of style over substance, because it was just a bunch of waffle. I don't know how many times they repeated the government, commitment to nuclear and 10-point plan and confidence that funding would be available. But the reality is there's nothing new, nothing has changed. There's nothing new on the financing situation.
A pretty serious issue. If there's,
yes.
I mean,
no,
if
it's a fundamental, it remains a fundamental obstacle for them.
And the Wilfer case is quite interesting, because I mean, they're just, in the end, the whole thing collapsed because there wasn't any money, and also because of the AONB and all sorts of other factors, biodiversity.
Yeah, so this will all come up in the compulsory acquisition hearings, which will take place in mid-August, we believe. So discuss.
It's Chris here. Yeah, can I just suggest, if you're interested in the financing, it's worth looking at the EDF's financial statements that they issued in, I think it was March, April. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it basically says in there that EDF are committed with CGN to sort of pre-finance decision, sort of an investment of 486 million, I think it is.
Yes.
And there's lots of issues that they mention in there which give sort of cause for great doubt that
there's a lot of waffle.
Yeah, a lot of waffle, but there's a lot more doubt in their financial statements, because obviously they've been fined before for trying to mislead the markets. And so I think they're a bit more accurate in their annual accounts than they are in the DCO documentation. So it's worth looking at.
Thank you.
And yes, all of that was included in our finance written representation as well. I'm going to suggest that we move on now, because it's nearly 7 o'clock and we haven't talked about EDF's exciting consultations. The deadline for responding to these is 12th of July. We could call them stage 6, couldn't we? Since they seem to be coming thick and fast. EDF very much say that this is normal, that the DCO will change as proposals develop and feedback is taken on board. And we must bear in mind, I saw this morning that the Scottish Power Renewables Examining Authority had just accepted for examination some revised proposals at deadline 11. Their examination's even been extended. So I think we must accept that, this, infuriating though it is, this will happen. EDF's new plans are not that significant. The most important thing, or the biggest thing in it, is a vehicular bridge over Pretty Road, which is a road in Theberton, and the Sizewell Link Road, or Theberton Bypass, was going to completely sever the community. So this is something that was first proposed by the Parish Council 2.5 years ago. I think there's a proposal for a crossing for pedestrians and cyclists at the Friday Street roundabout. Changes to flood culverts so that otters can get through more easily. They wanted to upgrade a footpath to a bridleway, and they've decided it's going to be a footpath again near the Two Villages bypass. Some realignment of bridleway 19 near Oldhurst Farm, which will involve the removal of some trees, some drainage works near the Suffolk railway line, and a number of things which are slightly confusing, but I think are about improving the tie-ins between local roads and the Sizewell Link Road, and that address current departures from HGV standards on the B1122 or Link Road. It was clear from the site inspection I took part in last week that more changes are to come. They are going to change the triple SI crossing again. I don't know when those revised proposals will be put in. They have not yet submitted plans for managing water runoff for the main construction compounds. I think the examining authority got a bit exasperated when EDF started talking about these sorts of things and said, well, you're talking about stuff that you haven't even submitted yet, so I'd submit it as soon as possible if I were you. So the changes are available online on the Sizewell C website. If you just type in sizewellc.com, it's the first thing that comes up. All responses should be sent to EDF, not to PINs, but of course you should always copy PINs in everything that you share with EDF. And they can be, there's an online form on the sizewellc.com website, or you can respond by email or in writing. And we'll update our website with this information tomorrow. I just haven't had a chance to do it before this call. And it's extremely tempting, since we're having to deal with this alongside the planning process, just to tell EDF that we don't want to deal with it and we're just going to deal with the planning inspectorate. But I've been advised by those involved in the SPR DCO that appearing not to engage isn't ideal. So obviously there are some things in these revisions that will be quite significant to some of you. So for example, Klaus, some of your parishes might really have a sort of strong interest in these sort of changes that affect the Friday Street roundabout and the Two Villages bypass public rights of way. Theberton and Eastbridge Parish Council is obviously extremely interested in the Pretty Road change. So of course, you should respond on those. But I think for the rest of us, it's just worth saying that EDF's had 8 years of consultation. Some of these things could have been included in the DCO. Some of these things are based on ideas which were suggested a long time ago. And it would have been preferable if EDF had sort of followed the advice to front load this process so that we weren't having to deal with these consultations at the same time. EDF look to be planning to submit their revised proposals around the 23rd of July. Any questions about that?
Well, Alison, would that be more consultations then when these extra things come in the 23rd of July? So what will happen on the 23rd of July is that EDF will send its revisions into the planning inspectorate, and the planning inspectorate will go through the same rigmarole about deciding whether to accept them or not. I think the planning inspectorate has already indicated that they are not so material as to, to sort of make a massive change to the DCO. I suppose there is the possibility that new people will be impacted that weren't previously impacted, and those people would have to be given the right to take part in the planning process. But I think this planning inspectorate is being quite flexible anyway about accepting submissions from people who aren't interested parties. And I did have a chat with Michelle Gregory about that last week, and and she said that she thought that would continue. So just a general point, if there are people who are not registered as an interested party and you think that they ought to be more involved, then I would encourage them to submit things to the planning inspectorate, because it sounds like they will accept them.
May I ask a question, Alison?
You may.
Yeah. I just want to clarify, first of all, are you confident that all the people who are likely to be affected by this latest lot of consultations are actually, A, recognise that it's happening, and secondly, they understand the importance of engagement? Or are you just working on the assumption that people will be? Because I mean, what is interesting is not as many people. I mean, a huge number of people were involved in the oral submissions, and the representation doesn't seem as quite as extensive this time. I'm just wondering, do we know whether people are aware that A, this is happening, and they should be, of course, because EDF have told them, but then the importance of this business of engagement. Do you have a feel for that?
No, I really don't, I'm afraid, John.
Okay.
You know, we've continued our communications in the same style.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the more complex this process gets, the more, you know, the more people, some people will feel that, you know, it's something that's really hard to engage with. In terms of EDF's public consultations, to be honest, I'm not bothered about that. You know, it is what it is what it is.
Yeah, okay. That's that one. But the other point is that I don't, from what I've heard so far, I don't think Oxford have got a view on this latest set of plans. I suspect, I guess, I haven't looked at them in detail. But are you therefore saying it's acceptable to go and respond to EDF and say, on the general point, that why has this not come? Is that or is that just going to be counted up?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Regan?
Yeah, it's just one thing. I was sitting listening, you know, respectfully. What 2 or 3 of us have been doing is trying to go through and, you know, in a sense, catch them out in the massive amount of documentation. What, you know, picking up the thing about this latest set of changes, what I'm very interested in is that, you know, they're putting up mitigations and then recycling them, you know, whatever the excuse is, and restating arguments and so on and so forth. But if you look very closely at them, often the arguments are actually shifting when, you know, somebody else sitting at the desk records them. And if you take the, I haven't looked at it yet, but the otter case at the 2 villages, I mean, my understanding, I did ask Paul if he would ask about the bat corridor at Hinckley when he goes, with the same issue in mind, that the question of whether you can transmigrate animals and all the rest of it is extraordinarily complicated. And I think what they're doing is they're just sort of writing a broad brush across, you know, yes, we can mitigate this. But I think the crucial thing is trying to catch them out. And it strikes me that the 2 villages, it's more than likely that a culvert could be put in very quietly and so on to avoid otters going over, if you like, the new motorway, the new bypass. That's totally different to the proposal that they had, as people will remember, I think, on the SSSI and the main access road to the site, to first of all have a culvert, and then when some of us protested about the culvert and sort of said, well, you know, the otters have gone by the time you built the embankment and the culvert, the next thing that came up was the culvert wasn't satisfactory, so they're going to have a huge great opening for it. And so I think all the time it's well worth trying to check in one of the other documents when you're interested in a particular proposal. And I found this with transport. I looked at the transport strategy document, which is only, I think, a statement officially. And if you read it very, very carefully, they say that the HGVs will be managed on prescribed routes, on designated routes. Then if you read the more substantial version of it within that document, it's not that. They become preferred routes. And the question is, you know, who's exercising the preference? But then if you look at another document, you know, there's a mitigation route map, which I've been looking at recently, you'll find, again, they've reverted to being designated routes for the HGVs. So I think people who've got a particular knowledge of a particular issue in a particular place, it's well worth trying to check that out elsewhere, because I think that's the sort of thing the inspectorate are interested in. I'm sorry I've gone on a bit, but you know, and there are the 600 odd documents, but I think that sort of following up is well worth doing.
Thank you. I
Thank
think
you.
the principle of, you know, noting discrepancies is extremely important. Okay, well, we're at 7 o'clock. Unless anybody's got anything really urgent, I'm going to suggest that we close. On our website, we have the top menu that says, one of them says take part in the planning process. I will endeavour to update that page tomorrow with the information that we shared and with this video, and I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to do it sooner. I just wanted to flag up 2 things forthcoming. Next Monday afternoon is our Suffolk Day guided walk. Because of COVID lockdown, well, opening up, being delayed, we have to limit that to 30 people, but we do have a small number of places left. So if you want to join the walk, and we start at 4 p.m. from the Eelsfoot, then please let me know as soon as you can. As I say, I will be a very knowledgeable guide, much more knowledgeable than I was a week ago. And the second is that we've just organised on Tuesday, the 6th of July, hustings for the East Suffolk Council by-election. So you know that Jocelyn Bond and TJ Hayworth-Colf both stood down recently, and the poll is on the 8th of July. But we will have an in-person event, very exciting, in Theberton Church on the evening of the 6th of July. And 5 out of the 7 candidates have confirmed already, both Conservatives, both Greens, and 1 Labour candidate. And Bill Turnbull has agreed to chair the event. So again, we have to ask people to book so that we can make sure that we don't exceed the capacity of the church, which we think is about 50 people, slightly more if we have some couples. So you'll find that information on our Facebook page, and I'll put it on the website tomorrow. So I hope to see you at 1 or more of those.
Oh, can I speak? Alison?
Go for it.
Okay, the Beach of Dreams walk on the 29th.
Oh, yes. Hold on, Jenny, I need to find you.
That's all right.
Can't find you. Never mind.
It doesn't matter. I'll just...
There you are.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, on the 29th of June, there's a walk organised called the Beach of Dreams, and they're doing a 500-mile walk. We won't all, of course, be doing that. We've all registered for 1 mile. So, Alison, you're doing walk 42, aren't you?
Mile 42, yeah, which is from the sluice down to the site.
Yeah, and we're doing this the next walk from the site onwards for 1 mile, which is just past, I don't know, halfway along the beach, isn't it? Not too far. So if anybody wants to join in, it would be great for them to do that. Is that right?
Thanks very much. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay.
I'll stay. I'm going to stop recording shortly, but I'll stick around for a few minutes in case anybody's got any more questions. And John, you wanted to have a chat with Regan?
Yep, very quick one. Do you want to, when do you want me to do that? Now or when everyone's dropped off?
Well, it depends on, or I can just connect you if you aren't able to do it.
Can I give John a phone number? Is that the same?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Okay, thanks, Regan. Yeah,